This is episode number 101 of Hebrews in Exile with our honorable teacher, Robert B. Holman Jr. and Sean Appleton. And if you were with us in our previous podcast, that's our Centennial podcast, we spotlighted a video that was put out by Mike Winger and Alan Parr that discusses who the Hebrew Israelites really were. And we actually answered and addressed some of those issues and those misconceptions that have been brought out about Hebrew Israelites. So we continue our discussion about this particular podcast that we featured. So stay tuned. We're going to continue on. This is part 2 of They Aren't Who They Say We Are. Hebrews in Exile, you know what we do. Let's go. Can we just laugh now?
This is Rabbi Robert B. Holman Jr. and
Sean Appleton.
And this is Hebrews in Exile.
Man, as hard as we try.
Yeah, I know. You know, we have encountered some stuff on the internet and podcasts that are completely out of line with Scripture, out of line with the understanding of Yahweh's exiled empire. Yahweh's exiled empire is the Hebrew nation of Israel dispersed, as he said would happen, to the four corners of the earth. To my knowledge, there have been 3 exiles that have been recorded.
Absolutely.
The Babylonian exile, the Syrian exile,
yes,
and the diaspora that the Most High pronounced upon Israel when he said that I will spew you out of the land. That has taken place, and Hebrew Israel is in the four corners of the world.
Yeah.
The big question on the table is how Hebrew Israel is defined by text and also by understanding who we are. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem that we have with this narrative of Hebrew Israelites is coming to understand, as we talked about in the prior podcast, which Mr. Parr brought up, indicating that there are different camps of Hebrew Israelites, and there are.
Yes.
The one that he is specifically talking about, that he has come in contact with, while he tries to sound like an authoritarian on Hebrew Israelites, are the purple and gold Hebrew Israelites, who are part of Mr. Parr's camp.
Yeah, Christianity.
They embrace the Christian text, which is Greek, and they embrace Jesus Christ,
sure,
and all that.
Sure.
Those are not pure Hebrews. Now, as I mentioned in the first podcast, and as Mr. Parr and Mr.
Winger, I think.
Winger expresses that their encounter with Hebrew Israelites is that they're angry. Well, I'm here, I want to open this once again to allow you to know that purists, Hebrew purists as we are, we're not angry. We're not going to shout at you. We have a deep respect for the foreigner, because the mitzvot that the Most High has given to Hebrew Israel requires us to have respect for the foreigner. Remember that you were once a foreigner in Mitzrayim.
Yes.
So he requires us by mitzvah to honor the foreigner. So And I have to talk about. I want to talk about foreigners. I don't want to talk about race because text does not deal with race.
Sure doesn't.
Text deals with nations.
That's correct.
Now, if we know who those nations are, we can place a color swatch to them.
Sure.
But we don't have to make this a race issue because it's not a race issue.
Correct.
It's a nation issue. So we're not angry. We're not going to shout. We have a respect for the Ashkenazis.
Sure. Absolutely.
And that is because they are the ones who have preserved our language and our culture. However, and before I go to the however, the things that we say about the Ashkenazis are not hatred, nor are they anti-Semitic.
Correct.
For us to be anti-Semitic, we would have to be very much against our Father Abraham, who in Bereshit, which is Genesis chapter number 10, I do believe it is, where after or during the war or before the war, when Lot was captured,
sure,
the text says, "Go tell Abraham the Hebrew."
Correct.
That's in text. That's in Bereshit chapter 10. I think it is.
Yeah, it actually is. It's a beautiful story
And
beautiful
so,
piece of history.
in order for us to be anti-Semitic, we would have to be against Father Abraham. Father Abraham comes from the lineage of Shem.
Yes.
Shem is, and one of Shem's sons is named Eber, out of which Father Abraham and Terach, his father, come as progenitors connected to Shem.
Yes.
So if you're connected to Shem, that makes you a Shemite. So if you're Shemite, you can't be anti-Shemitic.
Yeah. Go ahead and finish your thought. I was going to share something beautiful about our ancestor Abraham. He's such an influential person in our history, and I think it's germane. I think to where a lot of people are. But I want you to go ahead.
Now,
finish your thought.
You have to go back into Bereshit once again, chapter 10, I think it is, and look at the genealogies of the sons of Noach, Yephat, which to you who don't know Hebraic language is Japhat. In the lineage of Japhat, you will find a name of a people that's called Ashkenaz. These are the Ashkenazis that come from the loins of Japhat. They don't come from Shem. So in order for someone to be anti-Semitic, they would have to be saying things about the Hebrew people that come out of the loins of
Shem.
Father Abraham.
Abraham, yeah.
The Ashkenazis don't come out of the loins of Father Abraham. That's not hate. That's a fact.
Yeah, you can go read
That's
that.
scriptural fact.
Correct.
And the multitude of people who are clamoring about anti-Semitism are not any individuals who they do not have any knowledge about scriptural texts.
Yeah.
None. They have none.
Zero.
Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to make his point made about hate, anti-Semitic hate. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I would venture to say, and I'm going on because I don't know this, but I guarantee you he hasn't read a text of Scripture. Neither does he have any understanding of the Masoretic text.
Yeah, or anybody in his camp that actually couldn't.
So anyway,
Yeah.
making all of that clear, making all that clear, we can now move forward and once again in sharing this particular podcast with Mike Weiner and Alan Parr. And you were going to say something before we started?
Yeah, I was going to say something about Father Abraham, because I'm actually going through one of the apocryphal books right now called the Testament or the Revelation of Abraham. And in that revelation, it really gives you some insight onto Abraham's upbringing. And one of the things that you notice while reading that is that Abraham grew up in a house, which is kind of implied already. His father is Terah, and he is an idol worshiper. And through the event of asking questions and the event of actually trying to understand what all of these idols are all about, he comes into the understanding, because his upbringing in his house is not monotheism. The upbringing in his house is where it's polytheism.
Yes.
Where there's multiple gods in his house.
Yes.
And it's the influence of his father that puts that on him. But he comes into the understanding of the Most High through deductive reasoning.
Yes.
And you see that through this apocryphal book called the Revelation of Abraham. It's a beautiful thing. But again, I only bring that up to say what we're trying to do is logically go through this step by step, because unbeknownst to some people, you are in a polytheistic style of divinic worship, because you have multiple gods that you're serving. And so all we're trying to do is provide clarity just in this particular forum and do it logically and try to answer some of these questions, because again, these two individuals, I would say, now fall into that camp.
Yeah. Now, as you listen to Mr. Parr speak, he speaks with a voice as though he is an authority on Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah,
I want to set the understanding clear. He is not.
That's correct. Yeah.
And while he's not an authority on Hebrew Israelites, he's also not an authority on what Torah is, because he's defined Torah as just the first 5 books of the book. That's not Torah.
That's correct. Yeah.
You want to know what Torah is, you have to ask a pure Hebrewist what Torah is. Yeah. And I'm not even sure you can ask an Ashkenazi what Torah is, because I'm not sure they even know.
Yeah, they might give you the same cookie cutter answer as the first five books. And again, I don't think we're picking, and just before you start, we're not picking on Alan Parr himself or this or Mike Winger. It's just that this particular video is really the proxy for all of what's coming out of social media about us.
Yes.
And it's just this particular one that we chose. It's not a dig on him like we're singling him out.
No. And further, to make further clarification, the language in this podcast, if you ever listen to it, seems to be trying to establish a norm.
Correct, yeah.
For Hebrew Israelites. And I want to be clear that pure Hebrew Israelites don't fit inside the norm that this podcast is trying to establish.
Yes.
You and I are purists. We're purists from inside.
From the root to the fruit.
And the narrative of where this podcast is coming from, we've been there before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're not talking about something that we're not familiar with and don't know. We know. Let's go.
Sure. All right.
Just a moment. Now, let's get into some good stuff here about them. What are some of their beliefs? Now, this gets very, very interesting, and hopefully you'll see after I go through this how easy it is for cults to emerge and how they can take certain parts of the Bible and draw out a theology that is from a complete misinterpretation of it. So here's the idea, guys. Hebrew Israelites believe that some people of color are the lost tribes of Israel. And they primarily derive this from a misinterpretation of Deuteronomy 28. Now, I'm going to read a couple of scriptures from here just so that you can see how they twist them and how they misunderstand them. And you can hopefully get an idea of how they come to the conclusion that they, African people, or people of color, are the lost tribes of Israel. Okay? So I'm reading from the King James. I don't normally always, but I'm going to read from the King James so you can see how they're going to get it. So Deuteronomy 28:41, it says this: "Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Now, let me explain and give you the breakdown. Deuteronomy 28 is a chapter where God, through the prophet Moses, is telling his people, you have a choice, blessings or cursings. If you do what is right and you follow God, these blessings will follow you. But if you disobey God, then you can expect these curses to follow you. What the Hebrew Israelite does is that they read this passage of Scripture. Then they look at the black context, the African context of slavery, the transatlantic slave trade. And they read that context or that experience, I want to make it clear, back into the text, and they say that Deuteronomy 28 is not prophesying this to the nation of Israel. No, Deuteronomy 28 is prophesying all of these things about African people.
All right.
Hey, there's a lot of to unpack there. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there that requires an enema.
Okay. A good one too.
Let's understand that the first thing is that there are a lot of cults in Christianity. Mm-hmm. And some of those cults have been very divisive. Mm-hmm. They have been injurious to people. People have died. Sure. Two of them historically, the Jim Jones cult.
Yes.
The Texas.
David Koresh.
Mm-hmm. Cult in the name of Christianity. So There are a lot of cults. So you can't jump out there and say things about Hebrew Israelites in general, mm-hmm. in terms of being a cult. I have not read, neither have I seen in national news, any Hebrew Israelite camp associated in a cult form that has been injurious to any people. In other words, people haven't died becoming Hebrew Israelites.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's quite the adverse situation.
And people haven't been pinned up. Now let's talk about Seventh-day Adventists. Mm-hmm. Is cult. It's cultic. There are other Christian denominations that are cultic, in which that you can't do anything without the permission of the group of people to which that you are joined with. Mm-hmm. We're purists, and purists are not a cult. And if you refer to a purist as a cult, then you're on very dangerous ground of becoming blasphemous. Why is that so? Because the purists, we as purists, we adopt to, and we are strictly in line with the voice of the one who has created all things, the Most High. The question becomes one: what did the opulent spirit say to Moshe? Mm-hmm. What did Moshe say to the children of Israel? Because that group of people that he spoke to the children of Israel, generation after generation after generation, from which that what he spoke has been handed down, came from the mouth of the Most High. Mm-hmm. So if you now call all Hebrew Israelites a cult, and you put us in that link, you're blaspheming the words of the Most High.
Agreed.
These are the words that he spoke in Bamidbar, chapter number 15 and verse 15. And this is going to speak to a lot of, this particular verse here is going to speak to a lot of things that people have to say about Jesus Christ having done away with the law. Let's read it.
Okay.
For this community, there will be the same law for you as for the foreigner living with you, period. Mm-hmm. It's a semicolon, but that acts as a period. This is a permanent regulation through all your generations. Question is, how long do generations run? Through all your generations.
Permanent.
Now, the question we have to ask, is Hebrew Israel still alive and functioning in the world hemisphere?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
The foreigner is to be treated the same way before Yahweh as yourselves. The same Torah standard of judgment will apply to both you and the foreigner living with you. We're not a cult. Now, with that being said, we can't just say that all melanated, well, I'm going to use the term melanated people because you have melanated people and you have non-melanated people. So let's use the term melanated people as opposed to the term that Mr. Parr uses as black. The diaspora out of the land that the Most High has given to Hebrew Israel started long before the transatlantic slave trade. Started long before that.
Way before, yeah.
So you have people in various parts of the world that are Hebrew.
Yes.
And just because you don't know who they are, you can't put a pigeonhole on them and say, well, all Hebrew Israelites believe that Deuteronomy chapter 28 is talking about them because they're black. No. No, that's not the case.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I would ask Mr. Parr a question. Name me a group of people anywhere in the world where Devarim chapter 28 verses 16 to 68 apply to. Who? What group of people does that particular text apply to? Just tell me.
Yeah, other than the obvious.
Just tell me. What group of people in the world does Devarim 28, 16 to 68 apply to?
Absolutely.
It's not just to the diaspora of the transatlantic slave trade. It's germane to the fact that history, scriptural history, defines who Hebrew Israel is. Simply, while he wants to, you best want to know who all the black people are in text. No, who are all the melanated people in text?
Yeah,
and text defines who the melanated people are.
Exactly. Yeah, it does. I think one of the good points that you led with in starting this podcast was understanding that really this diaspora is germane to the people that are here in the United States and in the Western world. Yeah, you could attribute it to, let me say this, the transatlantic slave trade is just a leg of this last diaspora that we're in.
Yes.
That is germane. That text that we're talking about is not specific to the transatlantic slave trade or the Indian Ocean slave trade.
No.
It's a part of the whole entire piece of the Babylonian.
Yes.
It's everything that's once we got kicked out of the land, all these things went into effect. So I'm simply saying this may not be the last diaspora where we get dispersed to. It may be something else that comes after it in order for the Most High to get us our attention to come back to Him. So, any individual that's claiming this is and being specific and saying it's the transatlantic slave trade, I challenge. But I actually want to bring up something that, by definition, I looked this up while you were speaking on what the definition of a cult actually is. And when you read the definition of a cult, we don't even apply to that. It says a cult, which is a noun, is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. That fits more of what is going on the screen here more than that fits us.
Let's put it. Let's say it. That fits more to Christianity than it does to the purists, because we as purists are not worshiping a figure.
Yes.
We pay homage to the absolute, all-existent,
one,
opulent one, who was called El, who was called the Mighty One.
Right.
Is defined as the Mighty One.
Who is not a man.
Who is not a man.
Right.
So we can't fall into a cult. Neither do we make anybody. Nobody is made to adhere to anything.
Exactly.
It is a desire of an individual's heart within the fiber of our community. It's just like Moshe said, as taught Israel. I set before you two choices. Life and death. You choose.
Exactly.
So that's not. Listen. Moshe is not the WWF. He's not the World Wrestling Federation, where he's trying to make Israel adhere to the rules and regulations of the Most High, and neither do we.
Right. He ain't gonna put you.
We follow the same pattern that our master teacher Moshe has given us. So we're not a cult.
Exactly.
Now, did he talk about lost tribes there?
He talked about the cult, and he talked about that being germane to this particular one. Your kids you're not gonna be with them anymore, and they're gonna be ripped apart from you.
Okay, that's where we stopped. Okay.
Yeah.
Right? So now let's read it through their lens again. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Doesn't that sound like the transatlantic slave trade and the 400 years of slavery that African people were taken from Africa, brought over against our will, sons and daughters?
Now, understand something. While he's talking about people being brought out of Africa, Israel, Jerusalem, is in the northeast corner?
Northeast corner starts at the bottom, or you want to say the bottom of Eretz Israel starts in the northeast corner of Africa, right around where Mitzrayim or Egypt is, and it extends north into the Middle East and goes as far as the Euphrates River as it's defined in the covenant between the Most High and Abraham, when he tells him where the land actually is.
So that is the place we were dispersed out of.
Yeah.
It happens to be, Egypt is in the continent
of Africa. Yeah.
So it's not just all of Africa is involved.
Right.
We have them, but we can't enjoy them because sons and daughters and families were separated from one another when we went into what? Captivity or bondage or slavery. So they will look at the text in Deuteronomy 28 and say, this is a prophecy about us, about African people, not the nation of Israel. Well,
this is a prophecy. This is a prophecy that the Most High spoke to Hebrew Israel. Period. The prophecy is to Hebrew Israel. Period.
Exactly.
Mr. Parr does not know who Hebrew Israel is.
Yeah. Here's another thing that I've noticed about the tone of this whole entire piece that I want to address is that we don't look, he used the term lens, we don't look at this text in Devarim 28 as to play the victim card on our people. Devarim 28 is a reflection of a spanking that we have been taking because of the fact that we have not been compliant to the Torah mitzvot that the Most High has said. So using this and making it strictly germane about the transatlantic slave trade and woe is us and yada, 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 and all these atrocities, we don't look at it that way.
Yeah, because the issue is that the transatlantic slave trade did not just affect melanated people out of Africa to the United States. There are more Africans deported into
South America
and other places that are on that trail or that river or that sea run from the continent over to the west side, that there are, and as a matter of fact, there are more Africans that have been deported into Brazil than to the United States.
Yeah.
And that started happening with the Portuguese.
Sure. Absolutely.
And then after the Portuguese started their little deal, then came the
I think the French and the Dutch
the Ashkenazis, and the Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, come on, know your history.
The nation of Israel, but we are the nation of Israel. We are the true tribes of Israel. We're the lost tribes of Israel. Let's keep going.
Now let's talk about the lost tribe.
Okay.
Purists are not lost. We're not lost.
Mm.
We're not lost.
Not at all. You're sitting right in front of me.
We know where we are.
Right.
They are in exile, just as Scripture text has stated.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew text is not just about Babylonian and Syrian exile, but also about this diaspora out of the land, just as the Most High said would happen, and is validated by the prophets.
Sure.
Devarim chapter 4, verse 27,
mm-hmm.
Devarim chapter 28, verse 64, Yahweh says, I will scatter you among the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you will serve other gods made of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. Among these nations you will not find repose, and there will be no rest for the sole of your foot. Rather, Yahweh will give you their anguish of heart, dimness of eyes, apathy of spirit. Your life will hang in doubt before you. You will be afraid night and day and have no assurance that you will stay alive. In the morning you will say, oh, how I wish it were evening. And in the evening you will say, oh, how I wish it were morning, because of the fear overwhelming your heart and the sights your eyes will see. Now, I don't know any other people, and let me put this in. Let me put this clear. I don't know any other people on the face of the globe, and I'm talking about melanated people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just talking about black people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about melanated people.
Mm-hmm.
And melanated people take on all different hues of melanation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between the hues of the melanated man and the man that is not melanated.
Sure.
So the melanated man on the face of this globe, this particular text in Devarim 28, tell me, come on, Mr. Parr, tell me what other group of people can you name that fits this
mm-hmm.
from day one to this very day?
Yeah. And this is pan-Hebrewism that we're talking about. We're talking about, like you said, across the whole entire world. This is not germane to the United States.
All right. Deuteronomy 28, 64 and 65. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even until the other, and to the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known.
Yeah,
even
I read
wood
that text.
and stone.
Yeah,
So
yes,
they'll
Mr.
look
Parr, I
at
read that
verses like
text.
this and say, you know what? Weren't we as Africans scattered among all the people from one end of the earth, Africa, to the other, right? America, right? So this must be referring to us. We are the true tribes of Israel. We are the lost tribes of Israel.
Now let's make sure, because it's already indicated that America is not the only place where the diaspora has taken place.
Sure.
The Most High said that he would scatter you to the corners.
Correct.
Of the universe, of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just one place. America is not the only place.
Right.
Right? So that's why they call themselves Hebrew Israelites. Now I'll go to this in just a second. Let me go to another one. And among these nations, now watch this, thou shalt find no ease. Was it ease?
Now, let me ask a question. Is that not true?
It is 100% true. It is 100% true.
If you are listening to this podcast, ask yourself a question. Is that statement in text not true as it applies to melanated people?
Yeah. And so you're going to have two different, I can already tell, you're going to have two different perspectives. Melanated people will say yes, and I'm pretty sure non-melanated people will say, well, what are you talking about?
And that's because you haven't experienced it.
Exactly. So to downplay it, to say, to get, people on your side to say, okay, well, it's not really a real thing, and you're getting melanated people to do it, doesn't make it valid just because you get somebody melanated to say it.
Let me do it just a sidetrack before we get back in here.
All right.
I heard a story about a young boy living with his mother, his father, his uncle, and his grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
The young lad painted his face black. Went in and said to his mother, he was a non-melanated. He was non-melanated.
Mm-hmm.
Went into his mother, said, look, I'm black. She slapped him. She said, you need to go talk to your father. He goes in, he talks to his father. Father slaps him. Says, what are you doing? He says, you need to go talk to your grandfather. He goes and talks to his grandfather. His grandfather looks at him and he slaps him. His grandfather says, you need to go talk to your uncle. He goes and talks to his uncle, and his uncle slaps him. And finally he comes back to his mother. And his mother's asking, she says, so what have you learned? He says, I've learned that I hate you people already.
That's good.
Let's go on. Let's move.
But it's the truth. It is the truth.
Yeah,
and matter of fact, he even knows that.
Yeah.
He knows that emphatically.
Yes.
Easy to be in slavery as an African person in 400 years? No, it wasn't. These verses, they will claim, are talking about the plight and the experience of African people and not the nation of Israel. Now, let me backtrack.
How does he know that? How do you know that they're talking about black people and not Hebrew Israelites? It's because that Mr. Parr cannot identify as a Hebrew Israelite because he's a Christian evangelical, which means that his circle of friends and his circle of information is of a non-melanated group of people, and probably he hasn't been affected by the issues that are being faced by the Breonna Taylors, the Arbery, Arbery, and this last young man who was killed by the Memphis police, numerous numbers even in our generational time who are being mistreated by non-melanated people.
Sure.
And if you're going to tell me that melanated people in diaspora, I don't care if it's the United States, England, the UK, or wherever they live in the world, if you're going to tell me that their lives are weighed in the balance and they're not living in fear, you are really disconnected from who you are.
Yeah.
We know as evangelical Christians that this is talking about the Babylonian captivity.
Now, we know as evangelical Christians, but you don't know about Hebrew Israelites. Now, let me. Oh my! Come on, I got time is running out on me. Evangelical Christians they follow the narrative of their commentators.
Sure.
The commentators that they've gone to school to listen to are commentators that have taken their information from a group of commentators which in historical writings come out of medieval Europe. So the medieval Europeans have written a commentary to try to explain what the history is of Hebrew Israelites. Come on, man. You can't, if you're not part of who we are, you can't write our history and define who it's talking about.
That's right. Wow.
I can't, Mr. Parr, I can't write your biography on the basis of something that somebody's passed down to me and told me and try to make it accurate. That is that's a misnomer.
That's right. That's right.
So you're trying to speak about Hebrew Israel, and from your side of being evangelicals, that this is what it's talking about. Well, it's what it's talking about for you, but that's not what it's talking about to the pure Hebraic individual who studies from the Masoretic text and listens to what the Most High and the prophets are saying.
Well put. Hear, hear.
Where God allowed his chosen people to be taken away to Babylon for 70 years of captivity, and then God allowed them to return to their land. That's how we believe these verses were fulfilled in prophecy. The Hebrew Israelite says, no. This wasn't talking about the biblical nation of Israel. This is talking about the African people, right? Let's keep going. But the Lord, okay. Among these nations thou shalt find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. Were we resting in slavery? No, we were picking cotton, right? So, but the Lord shall.
So what he said, he says, were we resting? He says, were we resting?
Oh, boy.
No, we were picking. Who's the we?
Right. Black folk.
Mr. Parr, who's the we you're talking about? Are you talking about people your color? What we are you talking about, sir?
Give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. Do you hear this? This all sounds like everything that Africans experienced in slavery.
Again, this is, you're making it about Babylonian captivity. It's just a leg of what happened. You see, if we go through the book of Shoftim, it's called you call it the roller coaster book. I call it the relapse book, where they get in and out of compliance all the time, and the Most High enacts the same judgment every single time. This is not just, okay, they went into Babylonian captivity and came back to the land, and then that's it. One and done. No. This is a part of a whole entire system. And it's, sorry to say, some of our Hebraic brethren that are prescribing to understand what's in text have really made it about one leg of this diaspora, of this exile. And that's not what it is. And I'm sorry that you've got your information. That's why we're here to provide clarity.
Yes.
That's the whole entire point.
You know, everything that we're saying, you can fact check. You can
Absolutely.
fact check us.
No ease of life, no rest, trembling heart, scared, failing of eyes, sorrow of mind. Here.
My melanated people, in this diaspora in the United States of America, does what he just said and does what text read, does that apply to the majority of people of melanated color in these United States?
I'm going to do you one even better. To answer your question, yes. And it applies to those brothers and sisters that are in the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, South America, anywhere that we've been dispersed. Same storyline anywhere you go.
Yeah.
It's just not.
It's not
specific.
Isolated. It's not isolated to one geographical area.
Exactly.
Here we go. And then another one. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee. You will doubt whether you'll even live again. And thou shalt fear day and night.
And I don't know if that I could speak to that one. That one is, we're here in the United States, and you see that on the 6 o'clock news every single night.
Every night.
And I'm pretty sure that's the way it is in the UK and everywhere else where we're dispersed.
It was in the news this evening with the Department of Justice's examination of the police department in Kentucky. And it was deplorable that if you're pulled over, that you fear for your life as to whether or not, what's going to happen. They're yanking you out of your car for no reason. They're beating you for no reason, and they're filming it and taking pictures of it for no reason. A melanated man being stopped in the United States by a non-melanated person, yes, they fear for their lives.
Yep.
And people listen to this, if you're melanated, tell me, you tell me if that ain't so.
Yeah, agreed.
And shalt have none assurance of your life. You won't even be assured that you're going to live as a slave. See, so they read back in the black context into the scriptures and say this is prophesying about us. And then perhaps the strongest one, and we'll keep this in a minimum, I don't want to go too long here, but the strongest verse that they'll look at is Deuteronomy 28:68. This is one of them, that in Revelation 2:9. And it says this, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Now, a Hebrew Israelite will translate the word Egypt as bondage.
I fact-checked your text, Mr. Parr. Mm-hmm. You said that Devarim 28:68 is your Revelations 2:9. I went to Revelations 2:9, and Revelations 2:9 has nothing at all, nothing in it that talks about anything that you have mentioned Devarim 28:68 talks about. Mm-hmm. Does talk about that you say that you are Jews or Hebrews, but you are of the synagogue of Satan. It talks about that. Mm-hmm. In Revelations 2:9 reads, I know how you are suffering and how poor you are, though in fact you are rich. And I know the insults of those who call themselves Jews but aren't. On the contrary, they are the synagogue of the adversary. Now that's what Revelations 2:9 says. Mm-hmm. Revelations 2:9 and Devarim 28:28 are not the same text or information. So I don't know what he's talking about. He's completely off there.
Okay.
They won't say this refers to the actual place of Egypt on the map. They'll say it really represents bondage. So let's read it from their perspective. The Lord shall bring African people into bondage to America with ships. That's how we got there. Transatlantic slave.
Purists do not read the text in that context.
That is 100% right.
We don't read it in that context. Reread the text exactly the way it's written in the Masorah. Mm-hmm. We don't add to it.
We'll take away from it.
We don't subtract from it.
That's right.
So he's not describing purists. He's describing individuals who call themselves Hebrews that are inside his Christian camp.
Mm.
Slave trade. By the way, thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies. That's where we were. We were sold.
Now, I got to say something else.
Okay.
We don't read in Macbethian. We don't read right. in Macbethian language.
That's right.
It's driving me nuts.
This Shakespearean Othello and these those.
And who was Shakespeare? Was Shakespeare a melanated man or a non-melanated man? Who's Shakespeare?
Right.
Is he a European?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, man. We don't. It's getting on my nerves.
Right? Unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, I don't know how they interpret the last part. But the point is this, guys. I want you to see that this is how they take verses out of context, and this is how cults get started, okay?
Now, I got to pause. He speaks about taking scripture out of context.
Wow.
Listen. The Greek text is criminal for doing that.
Yeah.
How cults are started? Listen. Every text in the Hebrew text that is lifted out of the Hebrew text and pasted into the Greek text and says this was done to fulfill this prophecy. When you read the text, the context, the pretext, and maybe you have to go back before that and read where they're saying that, nothing in the Hebrew text lines up with what they're saying.
Absolutely.
So you talk about twisting. You talk about twisting.
Yeah, you
text.
Yeah. Definitely master's degrees and PhDs and doing that.
Man, and this is how cults get started. Yes, this is how Christian cults get started. Mm-hmm. And there are many of them.
Yes.
Hebrew Israel is not a cult. And if you call it a cult because people follow the words of the Most High El, one has to be careful of blaspheming the Most High El, who said to Hebrew Israel, through all your generations.
Absolutely.
We're not a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we got a lot to cover here, so let me just keep going here. What are some of their other beliefs? Well, because of this, there's some extremist groups that believe that Jews, and they're not the real children of Israel. No. We are Hebrew Israelites. We are the true tribes of Israel. But they believe that the Jews are just usurping their right to be God's chosen people. Yeah. And therefore, they are anti-Semitic.
All right. Now
you literally explained that earlier.
Yeah, let's go back again. Yeah. Let's go back again. Extremist groups believe that Jews, that's the Ashkenazis, mm-hmm. are usurping their right to being El's chosen people and are therefore anti-Semitic. Well, no. Let's deal with text.
Sure.
Here, Mr. Parr does not know Scripture or the history of the Jews, particularly the Ashkenazi Jews, nor does he know the history of melanated people in Scripture. 2 points to make, maybe more. Bereshit, chapter number 10, verse 2. I read, the sons of Japhet were Gomer, Magog, Madi, Yovan, Tuval, Meshach, Tyrus. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz.
Yes, there it is.
The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz. Mm-hmm. Riphat, Togarmah. The next says that they are from Japhet, along with the many Eurocentric nations, Gog and Magog. Mm-hmm. If Mr. Parr does not know his European history, he should study it and find out who people are and how prophetic scripture is into this present age and time. Mm-hmm. The Ashkenazi white Jews are people who are Khazar ancestry in the 8th century. They adopted Judaism.
That's correct.
Read your history. They adopted Judaism. Mm-hmm. So I can't be anti-Semitic against the people who are not Semitic.
It's correct. Yeah, it's an impossibility.
I can't be anti-Semitic, and listen, and by me giving this history, I'm not spewing hate. I'm spewing historical fact. There are several books, 2 books by Elmer von Fleischer. One named "The Black Hebrews" and "The Black Christ." The other is named "The Black Roll in Bible." Another by Mal Ali called "The Call of the Hebrews," and another by Janice Swinston, "Go Tell My People Who They Are." Then there are the well-documented books by the Nation of Islam, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, How Jews Gained Control of the Black American Economy. Another by another of them called Auction Sales, Jews Selling Blacks, with pictures of slave sale advertising by American Jews. All of these books are very well done and document the Ashkenazi's activities with the true people of the Most High, the nation of melanated Hebrew Israel. Before anyone calls anybody anti-Semitic or berates them, they should read these books and gain some knowledge. In Elmer von Fleischer's writing, he points out the blackness with the Bible and how Ashkenazis became Jews. You need to read. Mr. Mr. Parr, you need to read.
Yeah.
Before you come on trying to speak like you're an authority on something, you need to read. Know the facts before you speak as an authoritative on Hebrew Israel and its melanation.
Now, I need to explain this because I don't want to get into too much trouble with the Hebrew Israelites.
You're in trouble. You're already in trouble.
Israelite is an anti-Semitic. I'm talking about some of the extremist groups. The extremist groups. There's some extremist groups that are anti-Semitic, and so you have to understand that. Why? Because they believe that Jews are stealing their identity, if you will, right? So that's the idea. Now,
I've already named several writings that you can go to and you can look at and you can see what the quote, he keeps using the word Jews, so I'm going to use his language, what the Jews have done. There's writings that are very well written on that subject. Now, I'm not angry with them. I'm not mad about them. But there are a lot of people that have done bad things to good people, whether you're melanated or whether you're not melanated.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that goes the full gamut of humanity.
Sure.
Some extremist groups believe that white people, sorry, all my white brothers and sisters, but they believe that white people are deceiving people like me, people of color, with a whitewashed version of Christianity. And therefore, white people cannot be descendants of Israel. White people cannot be descendants of Israel and therefore are evil and cannot be saved.
I'm almost want to tackle that next time on Hebrews in Exile.
we got a few minutes left in this podcast. Let me say this. Okay?
Oh, boy.
His point about white people is not part of the purest Hebrews narrative. The purest Hebrew people that all believe that all people, according to Torah mitzvot, has a right at deliverance and being a part of the Hebrew Israelite. I read that for you already in Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 15 and chapter 15 and 15. So you've got that.
Right? And so, once again, guys, this is not every Hebrew Israelite that you will meet, but some of the extremists, which is why I put it in red bold, some of the extreme groups that you may see on YouTube and things of that nature, they subscribe to this idea that white people are evil, they enslave black people, and then their punishment for enslaving African people is that they are going to be punished in the afterlife, and they cannot be saved because of what they've done to African people, all right? So,
I mean, if white people are a nation of folk, that might even be applicable, but that's not the case at all.
Listen, Sean, we're going to have to continue this discussion.
Yes, sir.
In a third podcast.
Yes, sir.
Dear ones, I'm aghast, and I'm bewitched, bothered, and bewildered by the words that have been coming out of this gentleman's mouth concerning Hebrew Israel. But this has been a venture at the most, and we still have some ground to cover that we're going to cover in the next podcast. And,
Yes, sir.
Oh, you're aghast too.
I'm speechless. Yeah,
I hope that the information that we're providing, in contrast to what's being said, that you will fact check what we're saying out of scripture, text, and history, and know your history if you're going to come after us in any form or nature. Well, this has been Rabbi Robert B. Holman Jr.
and Sean Appleton,
and this has been Hebrews in Exile. Shalom.